Hey everyone, this is James here talking about another Italian genre film today. Today I am going to be talking about the great Sergio Martino's All the Colors of the Dark from 1972. This is the third Gialli he did. We've already covered the first two, so just slowly walking through his different filmography of Giallis, and I will get to the next two as well as The Suspicious Death of a Minor. So like the other two, this is a co-production with Luciano Martino as the producer, sorry, not co-production, and Gastaldi as the writer. This one also brings back Fenech. She would have appeared in The Case of the Scorpion's Tail, but she was pregnant for that one. She was married to Luciano Martino at the time. So yeah, this is kind of bringing everyone back together, very much kind of the standard sort of Martino troupe. And so, but that being said, there's probably a temptation to kind of retread different grounds and things like that. But this one's very different, and that's one thing I like about Martino's Giallis is the five that he did in this era, they're all going for something very different, even if they're bringing in a lot of the same cast, a lot of the same crew, a lot of the same cinematographer and stuff like that. So you're working with the same really, really good craftsmen, but you're doing different takes on different stuff. So this one is basically his Rosemary's Baby, his Repulsion, so very, very Polanski-ish. Whereas like Case of the Scorpion's Tail, he credits Costa Gavras and stuff like that kind of Greek Mediterranean setting. Strange Vice of Miss Ward, you see a little bit more of the Argento combined with the early Gialli in there. So they're all really different, even if they use very similar people. And I think the reputation of this one is definitely as one of the great Giallis. I think a lot of people, this would be their number one Sergio Martino. I've seen this film appear in, a good handful of top 5 Gialli lists before. For me, at least, I'm someone that's maybe slightly more down on this film than the average person, even though I think it's really good. I just think I prefer slightly different tones of the Martino experience versus this one. So, for instance, I like Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward a little bit better than this one. Even though it's a lot of the same collaborative and stuff, it just hits more of the notes that I particularly resonate with. So quickly, a synopsis of this film. A woman tormented by frightening nightmares decides to join in with satanic rituals out of fear that a man is trying to kill her, but the sinister ceremony seems to bring her nightmares to life. Okay, yeah, so I think this is Martino at his most dreamlike and his most stylish. And I will say, this film looks fantastic. It looks really, really great. I bought the Severin Blu-ray just for this episode. This is my third time seeing it, and it just looks really, really fantastic. I think the cinematography is perhaps the best of kind of the Martinos in this era. Just really, really moody. There are moments when we go into like these gothic places where there's like just incredibly drenched atmosphere. And compared to, for instance, Case of Scorpion's Tail, it's a lot colder. It like literally because we are in Britain, in London, versus Greece. But it's just foggy, the weather is just very, very gloomy, everything is very, very overcast. And so that helps to add a lot to the different atmosphere there. That combined with kind of the cult, literally the cult in this film, where we get these kind of very, very stylized, just experimenting a lot with kind of different looks and whatnot. If someone was an actual cinematographer, they'd be able to speak a little bit more towards the specifics of what they're doing, but they're doing all kinds of stuff with the lens, slow-mo, and it looks really, really good. The scenes with the cult in particular, I think, are fantastic. And then you add to that the Bruno Nicolai score, which I think might be, even for me, someone that's a little down on this film. And let me be clear, I really like this film. I just think I don't like it as much as the people that are super high in it. The Bruno Nicolai score, and you have all those elements clicking in these cult scenes, and those are easily, in my opinion, the strong points, the best scenes of this film. If we're to take a quick step back, this one, yes, it's a Giallo, but it's not really a body count Giallo in the same way. In fact, it really is kind of quite removed from the Argento model. You don't have black gloves or anything like that. So in my notes, I put very un-Argento. You don't have necessarily set pieces of a dead body that's going to show up every 15 minutes or something like that. So those Argento slasher elements are not totally there in the way that they are for some of the other Martino films. That being said, you do have a number of set pieces, and a lot of them are kind of the red herring, false scare sort of stuff. So I think that does really work well to amp up kind of the paranoia of the Fenech character. In fact, it takes a while until we start to have bodies start to pile up. And they do indeed start to pile up at a certain point, but a lot of those times it happens even off camera. And so we're kind of introduced to the bodies and whatnot rather than seeing kind of this very, very stylized set piece. So it's interesting what he chooses to withhold and what he chooses to keep more of a mystery. And I do think it does help to kind of create this mystery. One other thing I like about this film as well, I think the cinematography and the score are operating just A+ tier, is the different elements. Like, we're introduced to this woman, played by Fenech, who has had this trauma, car accident. And so we basically see kind of three different pathways forward. The pharmaceutical route, who is represented with her boyfriend, George Hilton. The psychoanalysis road, done by the great Susan Scott. I love both those actors, so it's always nice to see them. I will say, though, that this is probably the least fun George Hilton, especially coming off of the case of the Scorpion's Tail. And then you have the Cult as the third option. I watched this film before in the past with the English dub. I actually quite prefer the Italian one. The person dubbing Hilton in particular, it's just weird for me to see him in this kind of very stilted British. So yeah. Anyways, back to my point. The kind of three different ways to cope with the trauma are presented, and I mean, of those three, it's like, who's going to choose the Cult? But that's what she ends up kind of getting wrapped in, and she just plays a very frail, vulnerable character. So in some ways, it does make a lot of different sense there. Rounding out the sort of supporting cast too, we have this actress that plays Mary. I forget her name, but she's really good. And then you also have Ivan Rasimov. And so these sort of characters, and Ivan Rasimov, I've said this before, but he's someone that generates so much menace and so much kind of atmosphere. You just put some crazy color contacts in his eyes in like 3 minutes of screen time. He's someone that just comes off the bench and just you immediately remember the face. Just one of those great faces from a kind of Italian genre film of this era. And Martino really knew how to use him. Very seldom are his films heavy with Ivan Rasimov, but he comes in and he makes a presence immediately. So he's just someone that can make an impact with a really limited amount of screen time. Really good role in Lindsay's Spasmo as well. I think in the end, the strong scenes are the cult scenes. I will say, I think the weakest part of this film is the conclusion and the way it kind of like just does the typical wrap up of like, oh yeah, your mother, yada 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 yada, and it kind of just explains its way towards the different things that are happening. I think it's just a little bit of a letdown compared to the ultimate heights of the film, which I think come in probably the first half of the film, certainly when she ends up in the cult. So that middle section is really, really the juicy chunk to it. For me at least, it's that and kind of like the London setting that is just really dreary. Perhaps reminds me a little bit too much of home here in Seattle too. That are a little bit of a detractors there. It's perhaps not a coincidence that the Fulci film that I'm like kind of the most down on, even though I think it's quite a good film too, is Lizard in a Woman's Skin, which is also set in England. So maybe I just really like those Mediterranean settings with my different jollies. Who won the film? Sergio Martino. I think he really, really does a great job here. As I talked about, a lot of the craftsmen come together. Fenech is great. The cinematography is fantastic as well. And Bruno Nicolai gives an A+ score too. Double feature, I'm going to actually pair this with the previous film, Case of Scorpion's Tail. I think here you kind of get the brighter Mediterranean set, and you have a really contrast in kind of mood and tone. For me, at least, Case of Scorpion's Tail is pure fun. It's a lot of exuberance and things like that. And so a very, very easy, breezy watch. This one is definitely more moody and downbeat. So if you're in the mood for those things, I think this is a really good one. So rating, an 8 out of 10. And again, I really like this film. It's just not quite a personal favorite and not one I would personally choose to watch all the time, even though I've seen it 3 times. The way that I might choose something like Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward or Case of a Scorpion's Tail. We'll see what I think of the last 2 Gialli, and then also Suspicious Death of a Minor, your kind of Gialli Polizioteschi hybrid, when I bring on those films later this year. Okay, thank you all for tuning in, and let me know what you think of this film. I'm sure plenty of people disagree with me and rank this in their very top Gialli. And I will see you all next time. Cheers.